Okay, hello and welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do pretty much every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs for about 3 hours. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. So let me hop on over to my channel here. Julia, Karina, Lighthouse, Mofit, Mohammed, Blue Moon, hello, welcome. Welcome, welcome. And I was like, I knew I had something to share with you guys. So I just finished recording the audiobook for my third book, which is The Narcissist's Playbook. So that's exciting. So that should be out in probably about 2 weeks or so, because Amazon takes forever to approve it and get it up. But it is done. I had a marathon recording session yesterday. We recorded the book in about 2 days, in 2 days. And we'll see how well my voice holds up today. I could barely talk when I got home last night. So we shall see. Phoenix Rescue says, I totally forgot about tonight. That's why I have these reminders. Yeah, thank goodness YouTube started doing notifications again. They've been kind of hit and miss for a while. And I've been thinking about getting one of those text services where people can sign up and then it would just send out a text message ahead of time because some people aren't getting the notifications and, all that. So Anne says, I can't wait to get the new book. Well, I hope you like it. It's so interesting. I really need to start doing that. Actually, I will be doing this from here on out, is reading my books aloud before I publish them. It's just amazing, the stuff that the different way that your brain processes it, like just the things that you catch. And as I was reading this last book, I kept thinking like, there were certain areas that I wish I would have expanded on more. And, so I don't know. The book club people had mentioned that we should do my book, The Narcissist Playbook, for one of we could either swap out a book later on this year or we could do it next year. So I will make notes of everything that I wish I would have maybe hammered home a little bit more in that book, or at least touched on. And we'll cover that in that live stream. So I don't know. I guess the main thing that I really wish I would have covered in that book, and I wrote it, but I didn't put it in the book. And I don't know why. I don't know if I just thought, oh, this doesn't really need to be in here. I don't know what my thinking was, but there's, excuse me, there's a whole section at the end of the book that's the focus is on us and things that what's going to give us a fighting chance at staying safe around problematic people. But as I was, boundaries, and I go into much greater depth about boundaries and standards and personality traits that are exploited and all of these things. And I really wish I would have prefaced that with something saying, this is not your fault. Like, everything in here I'm saying is from this point forward about things that we can, look at and adjust. This isn't by any means, anybody can get tangled up with these people. So I just hope that doesn't come across as, re-victimizing to anybody or victim blaming, because that for sure was not my intention. And I also kind of wish I would have shared some of my story. So I'd mentioned in there, I've gone through this as well, but I wish I would have touched on it a little bit more, just so people could understand a better understanding of where I'm coming from with all of this. And it's not that I'm just, speaking based off of things I've learned. It's based off of things I've experienced. So yeah, isn't that true? Jack says, it's been said that you never really finish a work of art. You just decide to let it go. Yeah, that's that's pretty much it. Julia says, did you get to the 5 types of narcissists in the book? I did not. Here is the other challenge with this book. I covered that, like different types of narcissists in my first book, Start Here. Like that book has a ton of terminology. I really feel like any question that a person might have, any confusion that a person who's new to this topic has, that's the book to start with. It just covers everything, frequently asked questions, you name it. The second book, Out of the Fog, compares and contrasts a lot of the information in the first book. So like the first book covers love bombing. The second book goes into the depth or the differences between love and love bombing. Healthy bonds versus trauma bonds, a parent versus a predator, just sorting out these differences because this stuff's, it's easy to get tangled up in. And so anyways, this book, The Narcissist Playbook, the focus is on manipulation, like what it is, what it isn't, how to spot it, kind of understanding, like it just covers everything you've ever wanted to know about manipulation, frankly, and how to break free from it, common pitfalls. I cover the different rabbit holes of awareness that I have gone down, as well as everybody else, frankly, that I've ever talked to in the support groups or in the live chat. These different rabbit holes that people go down as far as understanding and kind of understanding that manipulation, or seeing manipulation for what it is. It's an awakening, and it happens gradually. And so how we respond to it also changes over time. So I covered a lot of ground. The downside to, I think, writing in depth about any specifics of these certain topics is there can be a lot of overlap. There's some overlap with Start Here. I would say in particular with like terminology and just the basics. It's just so difficult because, you don't know what a person knows going into it when they pick up the book. So I just wanted to make sure that if somebody grabbed it, it would be as comprehensive as possible. So, okay. With that said, I wanted to touch on a comment that I got on the YouTube channel the other day that I thought was fantastic. And this was in response to last week from Dandelion Greens. If you are here, welcome. Hello. She's talking specifically to Jennifer. So Jennifer had mentioned struggling with getting in tune with her anger. And Dandelion just had some really great insight. She says, about anger for Jennifer, if she happens to see this, I've learned that in order to get angry, one has to feel that they didn't deserve what happened to them. Perhaps this too is why Dana can easily get angry on behalf of another person's mistreatment. I struggle to feel anger at the really cruel girl bullying I experienced. I struggle to feel anger at the really cruel girl bullying I experienced throughout elementary school because I thought their mistreatment of me was due to fundamental failings of personality on my part. I didn't get angry with the ex-romance narcissist because I felt like I deserved his abuse. Anger comes from a place of self-worth, I think. I love that. And I would agree with that completely. And I think that's a sign, too, it's so interesting how this stuff doesn't go away. Like our emotions don't go away. They just get redirected. That's so significant. They don't go away. They just get redirected. And I had been sharing in the previous live stream how I really struggle to get in tune with my anger. But what gets me is if I see somebody else, especially somebody vulnerable, getting exploited, being bullied, just kind of unfair treatment, I become a mama bear. And I will go to war for them because it's so not okay with me. And I think a big part of that is it's kind of me over identifying with their mistreatment. And so it's easier for me to go into defense mode for them than it is for me to go into defense mode for me. And probably a lot of what she's saying, it's the same thing, just kind of struggling with feeling truly validated. Like, this is a problem. This was not okay. It's not right. And it's not fair. And then, holding your ground. So I thought that was just worth passing on, because I think there's a lot of people out there listening that struggle with getting in tune with their anger. And I just think Dandelion was so right on about, assigning appropriate blame to other people. This, how they treated you was not right, and it's not okay. And you have every right to be angry about that. And, it's not okay for them to become abusive. So, let's see here. And Gigi is saying, yes, I agree that anger comes when you realize you are not the cause. I was so compassionate for my estranged spouse at the expense of compassion for myself. When that flipped, I got angry. Yep. I mean, and it makes sense, especially if we've been trying to be understanding, trying to be compassionate, trying to be solutions oriented, trying to make things work, or just kind of the mindset that certain emotions aren't helpful. I've seen a lot of people, myself included, have bought into this, where it's sort of like, well, but what's the point of getting mad? It's done, right? Or what's the point of being sad? It's done. Or it was done 2 years ago, or it was done 20 years ago. I just need to get over it. And so then there's this part of us that's just really driving us to not feel, and thinking that we're doing the right thing. Like, oh, I just, I just need to be in the moment. I'm just really going to embrace mindfulness and really release all of these negative or uncomfortable emotions. And that's the healthy thing to do, right? Like, I'm just going to be in the moment. People tell me I need to move on and get over it. And I'm telling myself I need to move on and get over it. But a big part of moving, quote unquote, moving on or getting over it is really truly acknowledging how you feel and working through those feelings. Okay. So good luck, Agatha. Her show, I think it's this week. Is it this Friday or is it tonight? I'm lost in the chat. Whenever it is, keep me posted. I'm excited for you. Let's see. Elizabeth is talking about people pleasing. Cha-cha-cha. Let me scroll up. Oh, actually, okay. While I'm looking for Elizabeth's comment, Dave, I saw you on here. I owe you an email, and I apologize. My website went down, and it's been an app. That's another thing, you guys, FYI. My website's down. It's beyond broken. We're going to have to, I don't even know. Elves, leprechauns, I don't know what goes on back there, but it's chaos. And I'll be meeting with the web guy tomorrow morning, hopefully, and we're going to just rebuild it. So I apologize. I don't know. I don't know what sections of the site people can get to. It's just the joys of having a website, I guess, is what it is. Let's see. Elizabeth, I cannot for the life of me find your question. It was something. Oh, there you go. There it is. Okay. She asks, is people pleasing manipulative behavior? It for sure can be. And I think Michael had made the comment. He says, well, it depends on the motive. And I would agree with that. That's kind of the differentiating factor with that. Oftentimes those of us that are on more of that kind of extreme solutions oriented side of the spectrum, that people pleasing side of the spectrum, we're not comfortable with conflict or confrontation. And so instead of being assertive, instead of having important conversations, we just default to being people pleasing. Or instead of holding our ground, we default to people pleasing. Sometimes, and that oftentimes is more of a defensive strategy to avoid being abandoned. That term always I always wrestle with that because it sounds so major, right? Like abandoned, oh geez. But it's more of abandoned in the sense of the other, well, it's the same thing, but I don't know. In my mind, it just feels different. Like the other person leaving, like they break up with you, they divorce, they stop talking to you, they quote unquote abandoned you. So it's to prevent another person from leaving. And so oftentimes people that do struggle with abandonment issues do a lot of mirroring as well. Sort of like, I want to be everything that you want me to be. I want to go to great lengths to please you because I don't want you to leave me. And that's just coming more from like an insecurity place in them, where this kind of stuff takes a turn and can, I mean, it's problematic, don't get me wrong, because whoever's doing that people pleasing, you're losing large chunks of who you are in an attempt to keep the other person around. And that's a problem because that relationship's never balanced. It's always, if we're coming from that place of people pleasing, Pia Melody would call it, that place of like a power under mentality. So if you think about it, there's like a power under, and then there's a power over, and then there's that balance. And at any given time, a relationship is, there's always this like a teeter-totter. It's always in this state of continual adjustment. And so if a person's, it's too much one side, or their authentic self isn't showing up, and they have all of this ingratiating behavior, it's always going to be cattywampus. And over time, what's going to happen is that people pleaser resentment starts to build up. And they might not even realize why it is, especially if the other person leaves or doesn't reciprocate in the way that they want or need them to. And so what you see at that extreme end is oftentimes a person will say, it's the mentality of, but I've done so much for you. How can you leave me? Look at what I've done for you. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. So if that's a mentality that you've had or you have now, to realize, oh my gosh, I was using my niceness, this extreme level, which is problematic, this extreme level of niceness, this people-pleasing behavior. I was being so accommodating. This was like my social currency. So here I am trying to buy their love and buy their attention and affection and loyalty and commitment. And it didn't work. And now I feel really jaded and slighted and bitter and angry because I paid for it, right? I've been paying for it with all these nice acts. That's a sign that there's an adjustment that needs to be made. Something's too out of alignment. It's different if you were to do nice things for somebody else, but then there's no expectation. Truly, there's no expectation. If you're, I don't know, you have a friend who's sick and you bring them tomato soup, and you're doing that because you want to, not because you expect them to bring you soup when you're sick, or not because you expect them to call. You're not trying to earn reciprocity. It's nice when there's a degree of reciprocity, but there's not this weight of expectation that goes along with it. So does that make sense? Because I've had people in my life that have been people pleasers. And once I kind of realized, oh boy, this is where they're coming from. It's this, they don't know how to have a more balanced relationship. It's everything comes with strings. So every little nice thing they're doing, I feel like it's being held over me. And I don't like that feeling. And it's not a relationship of equality that, that I'm looking for. So, oh yeah. And there's so many different ways that we can get out of alignment. I think that's kind of I think that is the cool part in healing from all of this is these are stones we would have never turned over and examined otherwise, so understanding all of these, there's just dozens and dozens of ways that our personality traits can be problematic and we just don't even know it because we've been living this way for a really long time. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Let's see. Oh, I'm missing part of the conversation. Jack, okay. Yeah, and JJ says it's not that people pleasing is bad. It's who we people please. It's the people that we try to please. Giving to those that do not give back is the problem. Yeah, I mean, in part, right? I mean, I think if there's nothing wrong with doing nice things for other people as long as it's coming from a place of I want to do something nice for you, or boy, I thought you could use a hand with this, and I'm just no strings attached. Like I'm just doing this for you. But yes, it's a problem if we're trying to earn something from another person, especially a problematic person, thinking, boy, if I can just triple up on my love and compassion and attention and affection, and if I can do enough, if I can be their perfect partner, then maybe someday down the road, they'll stop giving me crumbs and they'll start treating me with the dignity and respect that I've quote unquote earned. That mentality is a problem. And especially in general, it's a problem, but especially with a manipulative, dangerous and destructive person. That'll put you in an early grave is what that'll do. It's exhausting. Yeah, Jack, you bring up another really great point. This was something that I noticed today. He's talking about emotions. He said, many emotions is basically my entire life. For me, it's getting used to the emotions as they come and learning to understand what they mean. And talking about something, don't give too much credit to the idea that men's stoicism and reluctance to show emotion in the same way as women is a bad thing. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of social conditioning that goes on that, and I mean, I think by and large, a lot of it's just social conditioning with how men relate to each other, how they show emotions, how they, do things in general, and versus how women do things. And I think, unfortunately, there's kind of been a shift. Oh, I don't know. I'd say in the last 5 or 10 years where there's this idea of like kind of almost like men are broken girls or men are broken women. And that's a problem because, there's differences. And, so there's that. What was I was going to say that was interesting is, anyway, kind of long story short, I was at a counseling center today, and one of the gals was talking about, one of the therapists was talking about this guy she was working with. And so we were watching the footage of their session. And it was interesting because, and I'm not going to go into detail, but like the guy it was basically like he was talking to himself. He was just talking out loud about what was different problems he was having. And so she was really kind of feeling at an impasse of like, well, I don't, this is really strange. I don't know. And, this guy just seems to want to come in and he wants to, just keep talking about the same stuff over and over. There's no forward momentum there. And one of the things that I immediately thought of was, there's a really solid chance that what he's telling you, he's never said out loud before. And so he might not even know how to start talking about this and to start feeling his feelings other than what he's doing right now. So it might not be that he's, that might not be that there's any other issue but that. So it might be just kind of taking the reins a little bit and just helping him do a deep dive. Because some people, I know men and women in my life that are very blocked as far as understanding emotions. And so they only talk about situational experiences. And so if you were to even try to do a deeper dive into, exploring the emotions of anxiety or fear or anger or any of these things, you just don't get very far because they're so out of tune with them that they don't even realize that they're feeling that way. So there's just a lot for all of us to dig through. It's it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we can get so disconnected from ourselves. Yeah. And you know what? And Jennifer, and that's, I think that's very normal. Jennifer is saying, yeah, I think I've repeated myself in therapy and elsewhere because I was never allowed to talk about my past. Validation is a big one. And just if you can have a therapist be there and just kind of hold space for you in a non-judgmental way. Just that alone is such a rare thing for people to have. And so it's, some of this stuff that's really traumatic. There's, Pete Walker talks about it in terms of verbal ventilation, of just this talking about it, and getting it out. And I think he's so spot on about that. Let's see here. Jennifer, I don't know when you hopped on, but there was if you missed the comment, I read a comment that was directed to you in the previous live stream that I highly recommend checking out. It was just fantastic. It was about anger. Okay, it looks like I'm missing something from Gamer Christina. So let me scroll up here. Okay. And I think people in the chat answered it. She was saying, my kid has to now walk to home. Wait, my kid has to now walk to my home after school and wait for her dad to pick her up because I work nights. I fear sending my home key with her because what if he makes a copy and no one understands my fear? Yeah. And then somebody had said, well, you could do a lockbox on your house. Yeah. Another option too would be, this is what we have here. There's a touchpad. We don't even have keys. So it's a touchpad door entry system. And the cool thing with that is you can change codes at any time. And you can also, and I don't know how much it was, but I don't think it was significantly more than a regular door lock set. But it's worth it. I love it. I love it so much. So you can also you can go online and you can see what code accessed your house and at what time. So you know exactly who's been in and out of your house. And, if you're not home and I don't know, the maintenance person needs to come over and you can't be there, you can assign them a special code that you then only make valid for that day or for an hour or what have you. And then it's also nice because when you shut the door, it automatically locks itself after, I think, 10 or 15 seconds. So that might be something to another option to consider. Yes, Michael is saying, Jennifer, I think she was referring to an earlier live stream. Yeah, the comment is from Dandelion Greens. I read it at the beginning of, well, close to the beginning of this live stream, but it's in written form on the last live stream. So if you want to go to comments there, you should see it. Let's see. Yeah, Rob is saying that was a really huge learning thing for me, the holding someone's space. I really try for that now. Yeah, I do too. I have a friend who's so good at it. Oh my gosh, so good at it. I just, like, that's her superpower. And that's a skill that I really try to aspire. I would love to even get close to her level at it, because it's such a gift to be able to give that to another person and not try to fix them, not try to get them to feel any other way than they're feeling, just allowing them to be, and just sitting with them in that space is just such a gift, and it's so powerful. Let's see. Okay, let me scroll up here. M. Crease asks if anybody here has dealt with anybody with borderline personality disorder. Yes, we do talk about that here. Let's see. Was there anything in particular that you were... Okay. And M. Crease asks, well, how did you deal with it? And here's the thing too, with everything really in life, it's on a spectrum. So this is what can be a little confusing about labels like this, is when one person says, oh, borderline personality disorder, they might be referring to certain traits that are more on like the mild end, or they might be referring to stuff that's really extreme. And so it's kind of hard to tell unless there's kind of more specifics given. But Jack had mentioned dialectical behavioral therapy for his CPTSD. And yes, and he was saying that that group of individuals in that group were mainly borderline personality disordered, or women that were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And yeah, I am a huge fan of dialectical behavioral therapy in general. I think it's fantastic. It's a fairly guided program. And if you are working with a therapist, they oftentimes will have groups that are either covered by insurance or free, which I guess that would be free if it was covered by insurance. But they're either low cost, they're free, covered or / covered by insurance. So that might be something, something to explore, because it's just fantastic. It's about mindfulness, emotional regulation, understanding your emotions. Again, skills we could all benefit from. And Rob says about my friend, he says, oh, a superpower, that's nice. He says, and your brother too, right? Yeah, he's cool in so many ways. Like, I just dig him. He's just one of my favorite people. His superpower might be, he does a great job with being non-judgmental. So if there's anything that I'm struggling with, that I'm embarrassed about, or I can tell him anything. And he's just very, uh, you know, just, I don't know, doesn't get ruffled, doesn't get shaming or belittling or anything like that. Uh, Jennifer asks, does DBT also work on CPTSD? It it can, in the sense that it can help. There's so much that's going on with PTSD or CPTSD, and the a big part of CPTSD is kind of like finding your core self again, and kind of just getting all the pieces of yourself back together. DBT can be like a great kind of offshoot of that. So it can help with the emotional regulation and just understand, just emotional awareness, mindfulness, these kinds of things, so it's all kind of part and parcel, like it all kind of goes together. It's generally a therapy that's, or a protocol, I guess maybe you could say, that's more reserved for borderline personality disorder, but it might be something worth asking your therapist about. I mean, it's, especially if you're struggling, because, with PTSD or CPTSD, there is that emotional kind of dysregulation component of it. And oftentimes, we might not be aware of why we're feeling so emotionally dysregulated, as far as triggers, as far as flashbacks, these kinds of things go. And DBT should be able to help with that. And let's see here. M. Crete says, borderline personality disordered people seem like they are demon possessed at times. Well, I mean, yeah, they can. I think whenever you're dealing with or experiencing, whenever you're on the receiving end, let's put it this way, whenever you're on the receiving end of someone who has really extreme emotions, and they are just, it's like a light switch that's flipped, or they're doing things to intentionally provoke you. Like, what's very common with borderline personality disorder is kind of setting up, it's a lot of self-defeating behavior in a lot of ways, but it's oftentimes a lot of chaos and a lot of crisis, and kind of going back and forth between kind of very black or white thinking. So like idealizing a person, like, oh, I love you so much, you're so perfect. And then when that person, I don't know, sets a boundary, let's say, for example, and then breaks that image of who they were hoping this person would be, then it's sort of like, oh, you're so mean to me, I hate you. And it's just kind of this push-pull thing. And a lot of that has to do with it, kind of thought that borderline personality, that there's kind of that core wound of abandonment, kind of abandonment mixed with entitlement, I guess you could say. So it's just, there's some of those traits of narcissism, like the entitlement, like the obsessiveness, like the controlling behavior, the persistence, that kind of stuff. But then there's also, it can almost be just like extreme, like codependent behavior at times, where they kind of shift back and forth between like being saccharine sweet or being really volatile. I guess in general, it can be kind of a volatile thing, but it's I'm sure incredibly difficult for a person with borderline personality disorder to have just this nonstop shifting of moods all of the time. and to continually fear being abandoned. And it's really difficult for other people to be around them to handle, to be on the receiving end of that. Something I wanted to bring up had to do with the purpose of dating. This is something I'm not going to go into. It's something I've been kind of thinking about a lot lately, but I see this. Of course, it's always so easy to see these things in other people, right? But one of the things I see, a continual theme in the support group, is people will say, hey, I just started dating this guy or this gal, and this is what they do. They either love bomb me, or they start raging at me. They cuss at me. They're mean to my kids. They're this, they're that. And it kind of dawned on me the other day. I was like, I think one of the reasons that we all tend to kind of get off track is that there's somewhere down the road with society, we've lost that dating actually serves a purpose. It's not just to be like, oh, I think you're hot, let's hang out. Or, oh, I have feelings for you, so therefore I'm going to stick around. Like that kind of stuff. I mean, it's important and it's nice, but that's only a small part of it. The biggest part of dating is discernment, is trying to figure out, okay, is you're kind of qualifying your buyer, I guess, really. You're trying to figure out, is this the kind of person that I want to spend, that I want to be in a relationship with, or that I want to spend my life with? And then kind of seeing. And so if they're having deal breaker behavior along the way, realizing, okay, this person's not for me. So we're using that. It's the criteria of, what do I want in my life? What do I want in a relationship? Where is my, are you going through and are you kind of qualifying this person to see if they are a good fit for what you're looking for? And ideally, they would be doing the same thing. Instead of, I think so many of us, it's sort of like, oh, this, this person has some great qualities, or I have strong feelings for them. And then we get in relationships and we stay in that, but there's really no foundational stuff there because we haven't been discerning enough. Yes, absolutely. Jennifer says it's like interviewing for your partner. Yes, it's like interviewing for the most important job ever. It's like interviewing for a person that you're going to go on a really long road trip with. Who's going to be the navigator? And can you swap off? Can you navigate and they drive, and can you drive and they navigate? And is it a good tip, or not a good tip, I totally lost the word I was thinking of. A good connection. That's not the word I was thinking of, but it's gone. Let's see. I'm not Christian, but there's a passage in the Bible that talks about kind of the importance of being equally yoked with your partner. And I just think that's a really great way, even 2,000 years later, to think of it. If you're not equally yoked, there's going to be problems. There's going to be that imbalance there. So I guess that's another way to kind of think of it. Okay, let's see here. Bonnie says, Dana, my narcissistic mom is turning 90. She is a nightmare, and so are her flying monkeys, the jackals, I call them, are having a big birthday party bash for her. I really don't want to go, but I will be demonized if I don't go to the narcissist's party. Well, I guess, do you care if you're demonized? Like, what would that look like if you were demonized? People are talking about cluster B, cluster B stuff. Okay. Excuse me. Jack, okay, so personality disorders, there's 3 clusters. There's A, B, and C. And so each one has different personality disorders in it, and each cluster is kind of has its own defining features. So cluster B is basically dramatic, erratic, and emotional tend to be the common themes between them. And that's narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder. So, and with all of, well, I guess primarily with cluster B personality disorders, there can be a lot of overlap, but each personality disorder has its own diagnostic, like defining criteria that a person has to meet. And there's, I forget, what is it, 9 or so different traits. And then a person has to have so many of those in order to kind of qualify for that diagnosis. But, you know, it's can be kind of a tricky thing to parse out. Bonnie says, well, demonizing her, they'll have it all over Facebook and smear me further. Well, okay, let's just follow that through. What would be so, what would be the result of that? Or what is your fear? What is your concern about that? Jennifer, let's see, hold on. Okay. Yeah, she was asking, she said she had been diagnosed with dependent personality disorder, which is considered a cluster C personality disorder, which is characterized by anxious, fearful thinking or behavior. And that includes avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And here's the thing with a lot of this. There's oftentimes a lot of overlap between dependent personality disorder and codependency, and codependency isn't in the DSM. So if you're going to a mental health professional, especially if your insurance is paying for it, they have to put something down. And I'm not saying that you don't have it. I'm just saying sometimes it's sort of like, okay, these are the features that clinician is seeing. And so then that's the diagnosis they'll give. So that kind of guides their treatment plan of, okay, I'm seeing a lot of these kind of defining features, these repeating patterns with Jennifer. These are some things that have caused her kind of struggle and strife in her life that she's identified. And so we'll go ahead and we're going to go with this diagnosis. But you have to remember with the diagnoses, you treat the behaviors are what's treated, not the diagnosis. So I know that can be kind of confusing, but I think it's a more empowered way of understanding mental health, because everybody's symptoms and behaviors and all of this are different. Versus, let's say something like, pregnancy or cancer. Like if you have a certain form of cancer, there tends to be a pretty, even though it can vary a little bit, there's a pretty standard protocol for this. It's kind of either you have it or you don't, kind of a thing. Like you're pregnant or you're not. Versus mental health stuff, it's a little trickier. So I'm a big fan of, I really fully believe that anybody can make any changes they want to make. I don't like saying somebody actually, can't change. Because who am I? Who is anybody to say that another person can't change? The issue with that is whether or not they're motivated to change. So if a person is sincere, and that's the difference, if a person is sincerely motivated to change, this is the trouble with narcissists and those with antisocial personality disorder, is there's no motivation there, because lying and manipulating and well, first off, it works for them. That's how they kind of have learned to get through life. But then second, so it's not causing them any pain, but they're so defensive. And when a person is defensive and they cannot admit any fault, there's no accountability, there's none of that, then they don't ever see that they have a problem, because they're too defensive to ever own any of that. And so if a person's too defensive, they're not going to experience guilt. They're not going to experience shame. They're not going to experience pain from hurting other people, because empathy, guilt, shame, all that stuff's been just turned off because their defensiveness is so high. That's why. So if anybody's listening to this and you're like, boy, you know what? I've heard some different personality traits that are really scary. I think that might be describing me. Yikes. I don't want to be this way. I get this a lot. People are like, I don't want to be this way. I've noticed that I do X, Y, and Z. I'm terrified I'm a narcissist. I'm terrified that, what have you. But if you're able to identify certain traits and you're like, boy, you know what, this worked for me for a long time, but this is a problem and I'm motivated to work on it, by all means, go for it. But this is why I also encourage other people around that person of, okay, then now it's time to get clear on where your deal breakers are and how much, if you are going to stay around waiting for this person to change, get clear. What kind of changes do you need to see and in what time frame? So, that's, I guess, that part of it, because these conversations always kind of go into whether or not, narcissists can change and all that. But, so if you're seeing personality traits within yourself that you're like, you know what, these are really challenging for me, these have been a problem for me, you're able to identify them, you and your therapist are able to come up with some sort of game plan to work on balancing this stuff out and coming up with a more empowered way of being, absolutely, you can get your life into alignment. Yep. And, Jennifer, and a lot of that's really common. She says, well, it's odd because I've lived by myself since 2015 and I've had a steady, albeit entry-level job for 16 years. I pay my bills on time, but my therapist says it's because I seek validation and can't make decisions easily. And that's a very common thing for a lot of people, especially after abuse of any kind. And that a lot of that goes back to getting in tune with your core self. And so I think we had talked about this a couple of live streams ago. So one of the things that you can do, one of the exercises that you can do about that can help with that, is to start making decisions. So, you're out with friends or coworkers and they say, hey, what do you want for lunch? And if the default is always, oh, I don't know, whatever you want, or I don't care, even if you don't care, making a decision. The practice here is asserting yourself. These are no risk, no skin in the game kind of decisions. You want a salad or you want Chinese food, right? You're just making a decision. It's just lunch. Like if the salad isn't what you'd hoped it would be, not a big deal. You've got another, 10,000 meals to eat in your lifetime. So getting in the habit of making these small decisions and consciously making these small decisions. It's amazing how so much of ourself can get eroded without us even knowing. So I think that's a big part of it, and becoming comfortable with your decision. I think too, a big part of becoming comfortable with your decisions is, it starts off making small, low stakes or no stakes decisions, and then also realizing, kind of having, because I think for depending on the situation, a lot of times if it's the fear of making a mistake or doing something wrong, then thinking about, okay, well, so what? What then? So if you were to make a mistake, what would that mean? Because mistakes are part of learning. There's no getting around them. If you're not making mistakes, then you're not learning. So you're not getting out of your comfort zone. So kind of examining what would you do if you were to quote unquote choose wrong? And then I think also in terms of people, a lot of it for many people, it's getting rid of that need of concrete proof, realizing that that it's your subjective experience is what matters. It's not what other people think. So a lot of it's knowing yourself well enough to know kind of what is comfortable for you and what is uncomfortable for you, what is nourishing for you and what is toxic for you, what is somebody treating you appropriately and what is somebody mistreating you or abusing you, knowing where those lines are. And this all comes into focus kind of gradually over time with practice and self-reflection. So, if you're walking down the street, for example, and somebody's walking fast behind you, they're not even walking fast. Let's just say a person that makes you really uncomfortable just kind of pops up out of nowhere and they're walking slow and it just gives you the creeps. And you're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't like people behind me in general. And that person just, I don't know, there's something off about it. Realizing, you know what, that's all I need to know. I don't need to know what their intentions are. I don't need to know if they are creepy. I don't need nothing. All I need to know is this doesn't work for me. So if you're making your kind of a peace of mind, I guess, part of like a big part of your North Star, just realizing, okay, you know what? I can cross the street. I can get my phone out. I can kind of, I don't know, depending on if you're on a city street or something, maybe you can just kind of, duck into a coffee shop for a little bit and wait for that person to pass. You can do any number of things. And getting rid of that need for validation from others, it can take a little while. But that also happens kind of gradually over time. And then one day you just realize, this is so great. I'm living my life kind of based on what's, my peace of mind. Like this either works for me or it doesn't. And then I adjust accordingly. Rob says, yeah, it's the proverbial fork in the road. What's the best information at that juncture to decide right or left? Yeah. And sometimes all we have is just erring on the side of caution, like sometimes we don't, and oftentimes there's no reason to stand around and wait and to keep thinking like, okay, well, I need more information to move forward, especially with like low stakes or no stakes situations. It's like, this doesn't work for me. Period. End of story. I don't care. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care if they think I'm overly cautious or, whatever. Let's see here. Yep. And then Rob says, yeah. And then to work up the good enough decision at the time. Yeah. And you know what? That's all any of us can do. I'll give you an example of something that happened to me today that I was really irritated about. So I went to go get a parking pass because where I park at this counseling center, it's metered parking, but it's only for 2 hours and I'm on the 3rd floor. And so then I got a parking ticket the other day because because I forgot to go feed the meter anyways. So I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going to pony up and I'm going to go buy a parking pass. And it was ridiculous. So I am agonizing over this parking pass. $35, not cheap, but not terrible. And so I had asked the lady all these different questions about how long is this pass valid, and this and that and the other thing. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to pony up and I'm going to pay for this pass because if I get a few more of these tickets, then it's going to pay for itself, right? So I get there, I buy the pass, and so then she's circling the lots for me. And I had assumed that it was this lot close to where I was working out of, and it's not. So this parking pass is like even further away. So I don't know. So I was really irritated at myself for not asking enough of the questions to see if this would be a good thing or not. Anyways, so I was kind of stewing about that. Like, oh man, I really should have asked that. I can't believe I didn't ask that. Oh geez, I wonder if I get my money back, this, that, and the other. And then finally, I was like, well, you know what? You have the pass and you don't have to worry about the meter. And so what? So what? So you walk an extra, I don't know, not very far, like the length of, basically you cross the street. I mean, it's not far, right? It was just me. I was looking forward to parking closer because I wear heels and it's just a lot to, you know what I mean? Anyways, so wasn't the decision that I'd hoped would be, but so what? So what? So here we are. Let's see here. And here's the thing too, with making decisions is you have reasons for making them. So just like my decision with that whole parking pass, the whole big part of the reason I got the pass was so I wouldn't have to deal with parking tickets anymore. And I wouldn't have to worry about running down outside, three floors and running outside and feeding the meter and then coming back up and doing all that. That was the primary goal. That goal was achieved. It just took a turn I wasn't expecting, So I guess think of it that way. Like if you're making a decision based on the goal you have at the time and it somehow meets that goal, but maybe a little bit different, then, it's not a problem. I think one of the challenges so many of us have is when we make decisions, basically about other people, like dating and things like that. We're like, oh, I don't know, this person's kind of giving me the creeps, or this is, am I reading too much into this? And we're really struggling with that validating ourselves and kind of seeing their behavior clearly and all that. There's that fear of, well, I don't want to miss out on a good person. But the challenge with that is if, or feeling like somebody's creepy or something, if the only way for them to prove us right is for us to get hurt, then that's not a good way to go about things. So we don't need to stick around until we get concrete proof that, yes, indeed, this person means you harm. Like we need to leave a lot sooner than that. And really with other people, it really truly boils down to this situation works for you or it really doesn't. If it's making you uncomfortable, if it's nervous, fearful, chronically anxious, you're dreading it, these kinds of things, these are all signs that you need to take some sort of different action. Lauren says, how do we know if we can trust our intuition? Well, I guess, so kind of like what I was just saying, our intuition isn't proof of truth with a capital T, right? So let's say if somebody has a feeling about, oh boy, you know what? I really, I've got a funny feeling I'm going to win the lottery, right? Or I've got this feeling deep down inside that that this person is a serial killer. Like we may or may not, hopefully we'll never know about the serial killer person, but like, or at least, you know, be in harm's way to find out. But our intuition, it's kind of warning shots that are fired. It's letting you know that something is off. So if just like what I was saying, if you tighten it up, if you move the goal from needing concrete proof to this either works for me or it doesn't, your life will radically change. So because when something doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. If somebody, here's an example, okay? I went on, I don't know, 3 or 4 dates maybe with this guy, maybe 3. This situation actually is what sparked me to start my blog. This was, I don't know, however long, 5 years or so ago, about all of this. So he was, you know, just on paper, the total package. He was handsome, he was funny, he was intelligent, all of these things, but my goodness, I had a dark vibe about him. And I don't know if I've ever had a vibe like that around another person before. It was just the most unsettling feeling. And just a bunch of things didn't add up with him. And, you know, and like, of course, I see it more clearly now because of hindsight and because I know so much more about manipulation and abuse. But at the time, I didn't. And so I just wasn't really, I was continually doubting myself as far as what I was experiencing and wondering if I was making too big of a deal out of things. And he was starting to become very persistent, very controlling. You know, it was just, the guy was red flag city, but it wasn't concrete proof. You know, it was all uncomfortable, but it wasn't outrageous. And so I was like, well, I don't know. Does this mean that he cares, or does this mean that he's controlling? Does this mean, and I was going back and forth. And I was asking anybody and everybody that would listen. I was so concerned. I'm like, what if he's like this great guy and I just have issues with men because of my past, and I'm going to walk away from this really great guy? Could it be I'm afraid of commitment and this, that, and the other? And I was just the mental anguish of it all, rehashing. And someone had told me, they said, you know, Dana, you've seen this movie before. And you know how it ends, and you know you don't like the ending. You don't need to sit here and watch the movie until the end in order to get up and leave. Like, you can leave now. And that was mind blowing to me, because no, I didn't realize that. I really thought, well, if I get up now and leave, I'm being judgmental, or it means I have issues. And so that was a big game changer for me when I realized I had to really tighten up kind of my criteria for what kind of situations I stayed in. And so then my new criteria became, if it's crazy making, if it's perpetually confusing, if it's, you know, uncomfortable like that and it can't be resolved, it's just a bunch of squirrely stuff. If I get a dark vibe from somebody, if it's not, so then the flip side of that, so the situations I need to be in, it needs to be nourishing. It needs to be empowering. It needs to bring me energy. So any situation that's on that darker side of the spectrum, where it's just a big, it's draining like that, I have to walk away. There's no purpose. There's no purpose for that. It's just sucking up time. Yes. And then Gigi says, well, yeah, but with your intuition, what if you are wrong? Well, then you are wrong, but at least you're safe. And that's it. Lauren says, I'm thinking about moving far away to from my narcissist, and my intuition is saying to, but I'm scared to. Well, and here's the thing with that, okay, is I don't even know if I would look at it from necessarily that angle, because then you might be going back and forth. Am I making too big of a deal out of things? Is it over? Is this person going to surface again? Are they not? Yada, yada, yada. Peace of mind, what we were just talking about, if you make that your new North Star, like, okay, I'm going to move towards what gives me peace of mind. It's huge. It's one of the, if a person can at all afford it and it works for their life, moving to a different town and getting a post office box and just kind of getting off the grid, is the peace of mind that comes with that is huge. You're not worried about running into them at the grocery store. You're not, you don't freak out if you hear a car that sounds like theirs, or people aren't going to be talking about them. It's amazing. And when you do, if you are able to relocate, like, your stress level just drops as far as that kind of stuff is concerned, because it's just the non-issue. There's different challenges if you move. You have to kind of create a new support system and learn your way around and all this, that, and the other. But I don't know. I think it's definitely worth thinking about. And why not? Why not move to a place that you like? It doesn't have to be that, I don't know, it doesn't have to be like you move to Iowa. Nothing against Iowa, but like, you know what I mean? I think when people think about moving, it's this feeling like, oh, I've got to either move close by, or I've got to move to some place that I have family, or that I've got to move to some place that I'm not really wild about. And it's like, well, why? Like, can you move someplace that excites you? And to kind of think about, like, well, what would you want in a place that you would move to? And to start kind of thinking of it that way. Yeah. Yeah, Lauren says that exactly. I feel like if I could move, I could be me. I can't even date or have a social life or work where I am due to the narcissist. Yeah. Yeah. I vote it's time to move on, because that kind of stuff, that is terrifying. I went through something similar. Well, except I could work and I could do certain things, but I dated a guy when I was in high school who stalked me for years, and it was just periodically. And I never really knew. I mean, he just would surface at random times, and it was terrifying. And this was back in the day before cell phones. I had my phone number unlisted. I had moved multiple times. I had quit jobs, but always just that fear of him showing up. And it was awful. And I didn't realize how awful that was until I actually moved out of state. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm done. Like, it's so great. So great. It helps to decrease that, the fight or flight mode. It's hard to kind of find a sense of calm if you're always in a state of panic, because this person just won't leave you alone. Yeah, Bonnie says, yeah, you really can't put a price on peace of mind. Getting out of town helps. Yep. If you can, if I were you, I just would start writing down some things that you're thinking about. What would make for a great place for you? And I wouldn't worry. I mean, at this time, I wouldn't worry about, I wouldn't get practical about it right now. I just would think, what are some elements that really speak to you? Are you a person that really likes, great weather year round? Do you hate snow? Like, boy, man, if I could cross snow off the list, I'm set. Or are you the kind of person that's like, I really like all the four seasons? Or are you the kind of person that's like, oh man, I love the hustle and bustle of a city? Or are you more of a, kind of more of a country person? Or do you like water? Do you like mountains? Do you like, what are some important factors for you? Maybe cost of living, where maybe rent is a certain range that would be comfortable for you. Or, I mean, that's always important, I think, to think about. And that's the other thing too, is that I don't know what your situation is, but I think it'd be a good idea if you do move to rent for that first year and just really make sure that, you learn the area and that's a place that you want to be. Just these kinds of things. You can go onto meetup.com. You can search meetup groups all over the world and see what kind of meetup groups they have in different areas, and if anything sounds good to you. And then that way you kind of get a running start of, okay, well, if I did go to this area, this is kind of what's going on and something I could be a part of. Instantly, you kind of plug into those communities. And if you can, to take a road trip or to fly out there and spend a few days and just see, is this area kind of what you thought it would be like? So, I bet. Bonnie, I am so jealous. Bonnie says, go to college in Hawaii. I highly recommend it. Best 4 years of my life. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. You probably can't go wrong with Hawaii. It is absolutely beautiful there. And the whole culture is just so laid back. That's what I loved. It was just, everybody's on island time. It was just very chill. It was my kind of people. Yeah, Lauren was saying, I've been thinking about moving for 3 years now, and making a decision has been driving me crazy. And now I have more health and I could leave. Well, and that's the thing too, is if you start getting clear on, this is the criteria that's important for you. So for example, when I decided to move to Michigan, okay, I didn't know what city I wanted to live in. I just knew that I wanted to live someplace, the lakes. I'm a water person, big time. So for me, it was, I wanted to find a city that was, that didn't have a lot of freeway. Like I didn't have to take a freeway to work every day, that I could take side streets, and that it wasn't this over congested city, that the cost of living was reasonable, that there were lakes, like recreational lakes around, that the people were really relaxed, that there were a lot of like farmers markets and kind of like mom and pop kind of places. I like kind of wholesome fun, like corn mazes and I don't know, just kind of country stuff, like the bonfires in the backyard, like that kind of stuff. And so that was what I was looking for. And like a local pub you can go to and play trivia or have a beer, like these kinds of things. So the more clear I got, the more it became easy. When I found it, I'm like, yep, this is it. And then you just know. But going on a road trip to each place and tooling around can really help to relieve that anxiety, because it's one thing to be like, yes, absolutely, California is where I want to be. And then you get there and then maybe it's not Los Angeles, but maybe it's Santa Barbara, right? Like maybe it's just a different city there. So, but if you spend a few days and you're just exploring and you have kind of this criteria, you will know. It's the weirdest thing. You will know when you find what resonates with you, you will just know. And here's the other thing too about moving is you can always move again. So it's not like it's set in stone, Oh, absolutely. I agree, David. He says, moving can be refreshing, but it's often hard when you're just out of a relationship and don't want to make too many changes in your life at the same time. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I think if anybody's going to move or be going through a divorce, it's really helpful to have a support system in place. This is why I'm a big fan of meetup.com and And if you are moving, or even if you're going through a divorce, to look around and to start expanding your social circle, because a lot of couples, even unhappy couples, get in that routine where it's just the two of them. And then if they divorce or if something happens, there's just the little support they had is now gone. And that can be really terrifying. So, yeah, kind of shoring up your dams and kind of just expanding your social circle, expanding your social life, giving you a chance to just meet some new people and just get out into life. Let's see here. Yeah, Jennifer says, yeah, Michigan's been my second home away from Canada for so long. Yeah, I've never been to Canada, but Michigan is wonderful. I really do love it here. So let's see here. Let me scroll up. Tim's talking to Jack and he says, I've heard Alaska is beautiful. Yes, it is. I've been to Alaska too. Yeah, Alaska is beautiful. It's like Colorado, but on steroids, is how I would describe Alaska. I had no idea it was so beautiful. Majestic, I think, would be the word I would use for Alaska. Let's see here. Let me scroll. People are talking about different places. Jennifer saying, I always wanted to move to the West Coast ever since I was a kid. I love British Columbia. I might be moving to California next year with my boyfriend and be closer to my sister. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think if you just look at it as an adventure and, that's the cool thing. We live in a day and time where we don't have, thankfully, we don't have to travel by covered wagon or, you know what I mean? Like you move and it's not what you thought, then you can always move someplace else, or you can always, I don't know, kind of adjust the plan. Okay, let's see here. Oh, wow. David said he moved from Barbados to Calgary, Canada, from beaches to mountains. Yeah, that's a big change. I've heard wonderful things about Barbados. I think I could live quite happily in Barbados. Let's see here. Let's see. M Hawk says, hi, I have a question. Okay, go for it. What you got? Jack says, the most I've seen of Michigan is a teeny bit of Detroit and then Ann Arbor. Yeah, Ann Arbor is a cool city. So is Detroit, actually. At least nowadays it is. It really had kind of hit bottom there for a while. It was really sad. But Traverse City is wonderful. Up north is just stunningly beautiful. The water is just crystal clear blue and sandy beaches and wonderful. Okay, let's see. M Hawk answered. Says, why do some people always have to bring others down in some sort of way? Well, I think generally when other people do it, it's their way of making themselves feel better. It's sort of like have you ever heard the saying, oh, like some people, if they want to build the biggest building in town, they build the biggest building in town, whereas other people just knock down all the other buildings. It's the same kind of thing. Like it's just a place of insecurity. And so they're fault finding in other people because it's easier. It's always easier to see stuff with other people, even if it's, and that's, and sometimes the stuff that they find in other people may not even be true. It's just their own, generally it's their own insecurities speaking. Sort of like you kind of the proverbial school bully scenario. He or she may be getting bullied at home by a parent or by a sibling, and they're feeling, weak and powerless. And so then what do? They go find a kid at school that's smaller than them or weaker than them, and then they start bullying that kid because it makes them feel better about themselves. So, and sometimes people just put down other people. Well, I think generally it's just from a place of insecurity is really what it all boils down to. Yeah. Limiting your time around those people is worth doing. Phoenix says, Dana, we're like two peas in a pod. I love all that stuff too. I was thinking about moving to Michigan myself. I'm a huge water baby. Yeah. You would love it. Are you in Arizona now? Are you in the Phoenix area now? M. Hawk says, well, specifically speaking, when I'm happy, I notice they tend to do it more, but when I'm sad or very tired, they don't. Why is that? Oftentimes, if you've got something another person doesn't, it can really kind of cause this ego injury within them. So even if they have it, right? Like even if they're in a good, I don't know. It's just this insecurity place. If you have something they don't, they're single, you start dating somebody, you get a promotion at work, you're gonna go on a vacation, you're gonna, you know what I mean? Any little thing can cause a person that's deeply insecure and just profoundly unhappy with themselves. That unhealthy ego just rears up, and it's wild to see how they can go on attack like that for no reason. It has nothing to do with them. But it's just a sign of an unhealthy sense of self. uh, Jack asks, so is it true that people will use a mitten or their hand to point out Michigan map directions? Yes, absolutely. We all say, okay, this is where I live. This is up north. Ann Arbor is about here from me. Detroit, trying to think, which way is Detroit? I think it's this way. I think it's this way from me. No, it's not. It's this way. Sorry, doing this in reverse. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Okay, scrolling up. Alyssa says, yeah, I still have to get to Traverse City for the Cherry Festival. Yeah, me too. That's been on my list of things to do. I was so thrilled when I found out that that was a thing because I just love everything cherry. So yeah, I'm with you. I need to go. Oh, there's lots of people here that have either been to Lansing or have lived in Lansing. That's wild. Lauren says, I lived in Lansing when I was a kid. The people there were really friendly. Yeah, I think it's kind of the Midwest in general. Just, just pretty simple, down to earth people. I really like it here. Let's see, let me scroll down. Beauregard says Ohio is not as bad as you think. Yes, I would agree. I was in, I think it was Columbus. I don't remember when, and not that long ago. And I was really impressed. It was a pretty cool city. Yeah, that's another thing Alyssa was saying, yeah, my mom used to go pick cherries up in Traverse City when she was growing up. Yeah, that's another, there's so many like fun things around here, like random things like that to do. They also have just berry picking in general, like blueberries, and you just, you just get a carton thing and then you spend the day doing that. They have cider festivals, just all kinds of stuff. Good times. Kevin says Detroit always made me think of RoboCop. That's hilarious. Uh, yeah, you're right. I had totally forgotten that connection, but yeah, you're right. Julie, so Rob, real quick, had asked, Are you close to Port Huron? I am just outside of Lansing, but yeah, I don't know. I'll be kind of tooling around this summer. So I don't know. It would be kind of fun to connect with some people. I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to coordinate a schedule of some sort if people want to meet up. Julie had mentioned about binge eating and said she's kind of okay, I lost the first part of that comment. Basically trying to stop doing that because it's just her eating to silence feelings of depression. Yeah, I think that's eating disordered kind of stuff can be so challenging. Oh, for so many different reasons, but because we have to eat. And so it's one of those, it can be a challenge to kind of moderate that behavior, but it's fantastic that you're aware that of what's going on emotionally kind of before a binge happens, or before just kind of maybe not the best food choices in general happen. Awareness of what's going on is a lot of breaking that cycle. And then kind of sitting with those emotions and kind of exploring them, like, okay, well, if I'm feeling stressed or sad or overwhelmed, like what's going on within you? And, did something happen? Was there something that triggered this? Or just exploring it as much as you possibly can. It might help to journal about it. And then so let's say, for example, if it's stress, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. I'm whatever's going on. I went to go pay bills and oh my gosh, and now money and like I'm just stressed. And you just head straight for, high fat, high sugar food or whatever your go-to might be. And if you're identifying, okay, it's stress. Like I tend to just head straight to the fridge and I just graze when I'm stressed. Having that kind of trigger response figured out is huge. So then it can be like, okay, well, what else can I do? What can I do instead? So instead of just thinking, okay, I'm just going to sit here, if there's this emotion that's surfacing, if it's stress, I think it helps first and foremost to label the emotion, to get clear on what you're feeling, and then try to get clear on why. And coming from a place of non-judgment, because sometimes it can seem like no big deal. Like, oh my gosh, I got a call from an old creditor, or I got a call from my mother or whatever, and something really stresses a person out. It can be difficult to really own that, because it might seem like this shouldn't stress me out. Like this was a long time. I don't even owe this creditor money anymore. It was a wrong number. You know, like I interact better with my mother now. Like this quote unquote shouldn't have been stressful, but there's still that response of going to the fridge and self-soothing like that, and realizing, okay, you're identifying that there's this feeling that's surfacing. You're able to kind of pinpoint why from a place of non-judgment. And then if you can, either watch it kind of, I think once we label it and once we acknowledge it and stop trying to run from it, it's so much easier for it to pass through. It's when there's all this resistance there. And when we start shaming ourselves, that's when it tends to stick around a lot longer. And it's harder to break. But if it's something that has more of a footing in reality, like you really do owe a creditor money and they really are calling you, and it, really is as stressful as it feels in that moment, kind of a thing, being like, okay, well, yes, I'm feeling stress. What else can I do to relieve that stress? And then kind of brainstorming some ideas. So when something like this happens again, you've already defined some options, because it's really difficult to come up with options in the heat of the moment when we're experiencing such a powerful emotion like sadness, anger, fear, stress. It's a lot easier to think about this stuff ahead of time. Just like if you're going to, quit smoking or something, or quit drinking, it's a lot easier to come up with a plan for how you're going to handle that when the cravings kick in than it is to start trying to figure this out when you're in the middle of a craving. Let's see here. Julie says, I feel like I'm a bad person. I think I'm a good person, but I feel like I'm bad because I hurt John for a dumb reason. Well, I think here's the thing. It's this kind of stuff. It's instead of thinking of yourself or ourselves in such a polarized way, either a good person or I'm a bad person. What if you were just to be a person who made a mistake, or a person that did something hurtful and that you're apologetic about now? So really, and when we're having those feelings of guilt, right? We're like, man, I feel terrible about this. I hurt somebody for a dumb reason. And I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking, or I was thinking. And I was acting out of a place of immaturity and hurt. And that's why this happened. When we're having these feelings of guilt, that it's like, we did something wrong. Here's the difference. There's guilt and then there's shame, right? So the guilt is, I did something wrong and we feel bad about it. Shame is, I am wrong. So feeling shame really isn't productive, because then we just feel bad about ourselves, but nothing's resolved. Guilt can be a good thing because it lets us know when we've done something that crosses our own moral boundaries. So and the whole purpose of that guilt is to motivate us into correcting that imbalance. So the way through that is through being accountable to John and saying, hey, you know what? I did X, Y, and Z, and I'm sorry. And that was not okay. And it's not going to happen again. And I just want you to know, just own it. You just fully own it. So sometimes, here's the thing though, but like I was saying, Julie was saying, Logically, I can accept that, but I'm a person who made a mistake. Emotionally, I just can't. I think if you can kind of shift your understanding from seeing how kind of unproductive shame is to what the real emotion there, like what you can shift that just a little bit, right? To the little bit to the right or to the left, however you want to look at it, shift it a little bit and into guilt. You did something hurtful and you feel bad about it. Okay, that's good, because that's how you should feel if you did something bad and you feel bad about it. Like, that's a completely appropriate response. The next step in that is being accountable. So if you can move through that guilt, then it will dissolve. So there will be times in relationships of any kind where people cross a line, and hopefully it's not, hopefully more often than not, it's unintentional, that somebody's boundary was just violated or what have you. But even still, if you crossed a line, let's say you were intentional about it, you were malicious, you did something really hurtful because you wanted to be hurtful, because you had some sort of, I don't know, deep-seated grudge, or you were being passive aggressive or something like that. If you're owning up to it and you're being accountable and you're saying, hey, you know what? I am truly sorry. This is what happened. This was not okay. And I own that. And I want to make this right with you. And so here's what I'm going to do differently in the future. So when these conflicts come up and you have somebody that's willing to handle it appropriately and willing to own their part, these conflicts can actually deepen a relationship. Especially if the other person understands. If you're like, hey, you know what? I did something hurtful. I own it. I'm okay with eating dirt for a little bit because this was just not okay. So I want to make this up to you. I want to repair the damage. I want to repair the trust, or whatever it might have been. And then just have that conversation around it. Yeah. Gigi says accountability is key in any situation. Yeah, it really, really is. Well, and then you can start there. So Julie says, well, yes, I want to be accountable. But Jack was triggered by it and is triggered by my negative emotional state. Thank you, narc mother-in-law. Well, and I think even just acknowledging that, right? So just saying, okay, you know what? I did this. I guess the difference is, was he triggered by it, or was he like legitimately upset over it? If you, I don't know, mixed my coffee grounds with dirt and I drank that, I'm going to be upset, right? So like, I'm not triggered by it. I'm legitimately upset by that. Was his response appropriate to what happened, or was there something else and something more to it? But if it sounds, I don't know. I mean, I think overall it seems to me that you guys overall have pretty great communication, because you're here, you both are in the live streams all the time. You're very familiar with these topics. And so is it possible to be able to sit down and just say, owning your part and saying, okay, it seems to me like this was your response to it, and that you're really hurt, and I want to make things right. What needs to happen? Do you need some space? Because maybe he's like, you know what? Hey, I need to clear my head. Like, I just need to lick my wounds for a little bit and gather my thoughts. And then let's talk about this in this weekend, for example. So there's still that communication going on, even if everything's not resolved yesterday, No, Jack says, oh no, is Dana talking about triggered in the new school way as an upset, but not emotional flashback? Yeah, no, that was the distinction I was trying to make because I wasn't, because she had said that she had done something hurtful, but then she had said that you were triggered. And so I was trying to clarify, well, were you triggered or were you legitimately upset? Because there is, there is a difference between the two. So it's, if somebody does something hurtful, it's appropriate to be hurt by that. Um, I was just trying to get clear in my head. Okay, so it sounds like whatever was going on, that Jack got upset, and then that kind of kicked off potentially another emotional flashback. Okay, that makes sense. I like what you said, Rob. That's great. He was saying, he's like, I love the my bad expression out there these days, but the next part, the no longer bad, and that ain't happening again. Yeah, I like that. That's the important part is, acknowledging it and then, okay, well, what am I going to do from here on out? Because it's not just apologizing for it. It's actually saying, okay, here's what I'm going to work to do differently next time so this doesn't happen. Uh, hmm. Let's see here. Let me scroll up here. Let's see, where is KM? Okay, there we go. Who says, my spouse passed. I feel trauma bonded and stuck. It's just now that I'm learning about narcissism. Their betrayals are just coming to the surface now. They lived a double life. Yes, what a shock. What a shock, and what kind of an added challenge to find out that way after they've died. And I would imagine then there's kind of that added struggle of knowing, okay, there's no answers, there's no closure, there's no conversation that can be had about that, and struggling with that. And Gigi was saying she can relate to the situation, except her estranged spouse has not passed, but the double life, the delayed abuse, and so on. Yeah, I mean, it just absolutely kicks the chair out from underneath you, especially if you just had no clue. I can only imagine what a shock to the system it must be, and what a wide range of emotions that must be as well. Let's see, let me scroll up here. Oh, Jack is laughing at me. When he said he's talking to life after narcissists, and says, were you here when Dana figured out that Julie and I were a married couple? It was so cute. I just figured maybe you'd miss that. Yeah, it took me a lot longer than it perhaps should have to connect that. But yes, I just thought that was so cool that you guys are both here on the chat. I mean, just what a I think what an important connection to make with another person is to have that in common. The whole that interest, I guess, in personal growth and in discussing all of this stuff and exploring all of this. I just think it's fantastic because these topics are heavy, you know, and to be able to be so open about this stuff, I just think that speaks volumes about the two of you. Let's see here. Yeah, and you know what? And Julie, that's okay. She says, as God is my witness, I was not intending on coming on and talking about this here. I'm really sorry. No apology is needed. I think you brought up some really great points. You know, we were able to have the discussion between shame and guilt and how guilt can be appropriate and it can be a fantastic motivator. Um, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's if we stay in guilt, if we stay in guilt and don't do anything with it, then it becomes a problem. So the fact that you're experiencing that and you're, you know, wanting to be accountable and wanting to talk these things through with Jack or John and just work towards a solution. I just think that's great. Uh, yeah, and Julia was saying that her and Jack each have their separate problems and that occasionally hurt each other accidentally or unintentionally. Yeah. And, you know, and sometimes that can happen, but it's always seemed to me, it's you guys both, from what I know about each of your situations, each of you has been through such a tremendous amount of struggles, some that are shared and some that are different. And the fact that you're able to even be open to having these conversations and work towards a solution and towards understanding the other person and work towards understanding yourself, I mean, that's so rare. That's just powerful stuff. So just hats off to you guys. That's so cool. You know, it's so hard being in a relationship, I think, anyhow, uh, but especially if a person's been abused, and especially if both people have been abused, then it can kind of feel like you're walking around an open minefield at times. Mm. Forward looking says, I think I'm at that healed space where I've digested every ounce of internet stuff on narcissism, but not a lot out there for putting that time in a box and sealing it effectively. There, have you, well, have you read the book? Where is it? I don't even know if I have it around here anywhere. It's called the Tao of Fully Feeling by Pete Walker. I really liked that book. We did a book club discussion on it a few months back, and he has a whole process about just basically really processing these emotions. So, and once you're able to process them, then they're released. Then then it's not about putting them in a box and putting it under your bed. It's about kind of allowing these feelings to surface. And I need to write this down because it's such a great process, but his process is something along the lines of verbally ventilating, healthy angering, which I love the way that he clarifies that. So allowing yourself to just get angry and to have that come out in a constructive way versus coming out at somebody else. And I think identifying the emotion and then feeling the emotion. I think that's the rest of his process, but it's along that same line. It's great. It's great. And he also, kind of mentions like all of this process, like it'll just kind of keep resurfacing periodically, with less and less intensity over time. And, we're better able to kind of ride those waves when they do surface. Oh, well, thank you, Overcomer. She says, hi, Dana. I want you to know that you're my role model for a mature woman. I look up to you and I've learned so much from you. I've grown so much since I came across your videos. Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. I'm glad, it's so funny. Somebody, I don't even remember how we got to talking about it. YouTube. I was talking to somebody about YouTube, and most people think YouTube is, for a lot younger people, like 20-year-olds and such. And I was joking. I said, I often feel like I'm a mom on YouTube, like the YouTube mom. But that's okay. I'm totally okay with being a YouTube mom. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Okay, well, that's a really great point. So forward looking says, okay, but to reprocess ad nauseum, doesn't that just keep it front and center in your mind? Makes the neural pathways stronger rather than weaker. You bring up a really valid point. So I think it's such a challenge because I don't know if there's any real right way for somebody to do all this. And something you might want to try is, if you haven't already, there's therapy called EMDR. And a lot of people experience a release of a lot of just stored trauma with just a few sessions of it. So that might be something to try. And I think I don't know. I think it just depends. There's certain emotions. I mean, I got to the place where I was tired. I'm like, I don't know. I was ready to just kind of drive on. And so there were a few things that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to shut the door on that and just drive on. It was a conscious decision. And I don't feel like I've repressed any of it. You know what I mean? Like, it was more of I've already felt enough pain from this. I've already, I just don't know if going stone by stone, turning over this and sitting with all of this it does kind of feel counterproductive at a time, at a certain place. At least it did for me. So if you're at that place where you're like, you know what, I feel like I've gone around this mountain enough times with certain amounts of pain. I'm ready to try something different than maybe trying EMDR therapy. That could be worth a shot. Or, and maybe too, kind of reframing the meaning that you're associating to a lot of this can help as well. That's a fine line too, because it can feel really re-victimizing to somebody to kind of reframe stuff, but it can also feel empowering. I think you'll know as you start going down that path, kind of what's working for you and what's not. Oh, thanks. M. Mars for the live stream donation says, thank you, Dana, for caring. Yes, you are so very welcome. Thank you. There's also, Zachary had asked, is that I wonder if meditation and other mindfulness techniques support healing from narcissistic abuse. I, you know, I, yes, yes, I don't know how specific they tend to get. Uh, However, there's sometimes, again, different stages of healing for different people. Getting present in your body and learning to turn inward and it's the weirdest thing how we can be in a body and yet not be in a body. Like we live in this body, 24 hours a day, but it's weird how we can separate ourselves from our feelings, from even bodily sensations of pain, of discomfort, of muscle tension, all this stuff. It's just wild what the brain can numb out. There's trauma yoga, which is kind of becoming a new thing, which is really exciting. And that's geared towards, and oftentimes those classes are free or very low cost or donation based. So you might want to check in your area if that's something that appeals to anybody. And the whole goal is to help a person to become comfortable within their body again. So it's, and to be in the present moment. So that can be incredibly helpful as well. And Jack was saying that he looked into EMDR and concluded at the time that he was not prepared for the possible increased emotional flashbacks. And here's the thing too. So if you go to see somebody, let's just say, excuse me, let's just say for EMDR, I would bring that up. I would just say, you know what, there's some stuff I want to work on, but can we start in safe ways first? Because these are my concerns. I'm concerned that if we start going down this trail, that I'm going to have these flashbacks that are just going to be debilitating. And that's terrifying to me because I don't know if I get into a tailspin like that, if I'll be able to pull myself out or how long it'll take me. And I would be very open about that and see what they say. Salon says, people who experience, excuse me, I have this tickle in my throat. People who experience emotional flashbacks and somatic sensations like me might need to process trauma the most. I've been repressing it for years. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. We were talking about this earlier on in the live stream about how these emotions, they don't go away. They just take a different direction. And it's wild, all of the different ways this stuff can come out. So I think, I don't know, a lot of it, at least for me, that's helped has been changing the relationship I have with my emotions. For decades, I was so focused on fighting them, like for a wide variety of reasons. But, I guess it was just thought of, okay, anxiety is bad, depression is bad, feeling sad is bad, feeling angry is bad. And so just don't feel that way. And, that doesn't, it doesn't work. That's not a very good strategy. And so, like learning to experience these different feelings in appropriate ways and realizing that all of those emotions, when they surface, they have a message for you. Like they're on your side. That's what's so, I don't know, kind of wild about the whole thing is it's everything, your brain and your body, it's you, like you're all on the same team. So like it's trying to get through to you. And so a lot of these things are like, oh man, I wish the nightmares would go away. I wish all of these different, all of this stuff would go away, but it's our body trying to signal to us in so many different ways, trying to keep us safe or trying to get a message across to us. And so if you're able to kind of start pulling out those messages of what could this mean? Like, what could my body or my brain be trying to tell me? Oftentimes when you can get the message, the uncomfortable emotion that it's wrapped in starts to dissolve, because then it doesn't need to be there anymore. So a lot of these, I would say the vast majority of the time, if not all of the time, these what we call negative emotions or uncomfortable, I prefer uncomfortable emotions because I think all emotions are positive because they all have a message for us. These uncomfortable emotions, those are the ones that are really worth listening to, because they tend to be so uncomfortable because they have an important message for us. But that's the challenge with all of this, is it's really difficult to sit with pain, with emotional pain of any kind, and to listen for that message that it's trying to get across to us. That's a really great point, Rob. He says that he did a composition back in 2009 that had one of his professors come up to him afterwards and say, "Is everything okay?" He says his emotion went that way. Yes. And you bring up a really great point of that's the power in like music therapy or in art therapy, is oftentimes when there is, especially when there's trauma, but when there's extreme stress, that logic and critical thinking part of our brain, that neocortex part of our brain, it shuts down. It goes offline. So it's greatly diminished. So our ability for speech, this is why people, when they go through trauma and they become mute, if you've ever heard stories like that, where they just stop talking. Maya Angelou, just an interesting side story, that happened to her when she was younger. She was incredibly traumatized. Her parents that basically packed her and I think a sibling up and put them on young. They were like 6 years old, packed them on a train and sent them cross country to go live with relatives. And she was so traumatized by the whole experience that she just quit talking. Then this lasted for like over a year, maybe even a couple years. So when a person's under stress like this, it can manifest itself in a wide variety of ways. And so I guess what I'm saying is that whole speech and language part of the brain is also something that tends to shut down. This is you might have experienced this if you've ever, I don't know, had somebody start yelling at you, or you get in a fight and you just don't know what to say and you're just standing there at a loss for words. That's why. It's that part of the brain is just we're not able to access it during that time. It can come back online later on when that fight or flight mode has passed. But sometimes it can kind of get stuck in that. And so it can be difficult for it to come back online. So some great ways around that to bypass that and to not try to push yourself or anybody else who's experiencing that into communicating the way, the kind of quote unquote normal way, right? Or the way that we're used to communicating, is to work with where they are or to work with where you are. And art and music can be so, I think they each have their own strengths. I mean, art is so great because you're able to express yourself with colors and, the intensity and so much. With music can really be great, especially if you're listening to music, because it can immediately evoke an emotion. And so you're boom, like you're into this emotion. And so it's it's a great way to kind of, I guess, ride those waves of certain feelings as they come out. So that might be something, if anybody's really kind of feeling frozen or numb, to explore those different avenues. It was interesting. I think most of you guys know I've been working on a book with Agatha, and she's an artist. And I really enjoy her artwork. She just really has a really unique style, but she also has quite the range. And so what was so interesting is have been going through this book is she had painted a lot of these paintings kind of throughout different periods of her life. And so because English isn't her first language, I'm the one that's doing the writing. And so she would explain. So what we would do is I would have her explain to me about the painting. And so then I would ask her questions like, okay, well, I noticed that you used red here, or that you used something else here, or can you just tell me a little bit about this and what was significant for you in this? And it's been such an interesting experience, I think, for both of us, because there were a lot of like certain paintings she had a lot of clarity about. And then there were other ones where it wasn't until she began talking about it and somebody else asking, me asking her questions, that she was able to start realizing, oh my gosh, that's why I did that. And that's why I did this. And this is what this symbolizes. And it was just this totally different layer of understanding that she was able to get from that. I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was a really neat experience. So, okay, let me scroll up. Jennifer says, yeah, her artwork is amazing. I agree. I think it's in the other room. There's one painting that's, oh gosh, I think it's in the closet. I put all the paintings in the closet because I meant to hang them up and then I forgot that they were in there until just now. There's one, it's called Who Am I? And it's so powerful. Like the person is this alien looking being and they're staring at their hand. And it's just kind of that feeling after trauma where you're so disassociated, like you don't recognize yourself. You don't know who you are. You don't even really feel human. I just thought she captured it so well. It's just one of my favorites. Okay, yeah, that is a great question. Jennifer says, well, how do you know the difference between intuition and paranoia? Okay, well, intuition, it's kind of like your spidey sense. It's just that sense of, that's off. Generally, that's off. Is intuition, we call it sounds woo-woo, but it's not. It's what we call intuition is our gut instinct. And so all of that exists in the mammalian part of our brain, which is the largest part of our brain, and the reptile part of our brain. And so we call it gut instincts because our brain is taking in millions, if not billions of bits of data a second. It's way more than our logic and critical thinking part of our brain can even hope to process. And so, but all of this is being absorbed by these more primitive levels of our brain. And so then it filters that information through our experiences, through all kinds of different lenses, basically. And so by the time that gets up to, so anyways, a lot of stuff that we're experiencing doesn't make its way up to what we would consider the neocortex, the human part of our brain. And because it doesn't make logical sense to us, we're often quick to dismiss it because we don't understand it. Just like I was saying earlier about that guy that I went on those dates with. And at the time, and I see this in so many people, and it's so cool when they start making these connections as well. At the time, I didn't have the vocabulary for what I was experiencing. And so, but it just registered as confusion. And so I'm like, this is odd. This is weird. Trying to describe my experience, but it didn't seem valid enough. I have, a dark feeling about him. It's off. It's unsettling. I'm uncertain. It's confusing. All of these. What was really going on is there was a lot of problematic behavior there, but it wasn't as overt as it wasn't concrete enough for me to be able to point to something within my range of understanding, I should say, with my range of understanding at that time to say that's a problem. And so because I was missing, sort of like if you, how does that go? Like the Eskimos supposedly have, I don't know, like 12 different words for the concept of snow. And each word differentiates different types of snow. Like they might have, there might be powdery snow or icy snow or I don't know, big snow or little snow. They have all these differentiations. But for those of us that don't need that, we just have, snow. It's snowing out. There is no differentiation, but there is a difference, right? I mean, ask anybody that's hardcore into skiing or that lives in a climate like Alaska. They know there's differences in that, but because we're lacking the vocabulary for it, we don't see it, but we intuitively know that it's different, even though we're not able to articulate why. So when we experience something that doesn't make sense to us, that's not registering to like the neocortex, that logic and critical thinking part of our brain, our body, because our brain's number one job is to keep you alive. It's to keep you safe. That's the main job. Like you got one job, that's it, brain. And so it's trying to warn you about these things. So these emotions of fear, especially, these are like the most primitive emotion. Sensing danger, responding to danger, even single cell organisms respond to danger. They respond to a threat by getting away from it. So this is, like this is hardwired into us. So we call it a gut instinct because we feel like something's off, and then our vagus nerve, okay, which runs from like your brain stem all the way down to your rectum, it touches pretty much every single major organ in between. That limbic system part of your brain that controls emotions, it's sending signals. And so there's all kinds of stuff going on with different chemicals, and you've got like adrenaline and cortisol, and it's this feedback loop that's going on between like your brain and your body, basically, with all kinds of things going on. And so when it's registering in your gut, that's why. So it's just that that feeling that something's off, that there's danger or that there's a problem. And that's why it's so important to listen to that, because it's very rarely wrong. It's so hardwired into us. Paranoia, paranoia, it's the sense that basically everybody's out to get you. So, and it's irrational. It's other people, are out to get you. I think oftentimes it's difficult after abuse to kind of navigate that middle ground. And I think it's one of those things, it just kind of happens when you start learning to trust yourself again, and it helps to start taking small steps with very like low risk to no risk type situations. And then just building on that. A lot of it's the educational part of it too, like understanding. The more you understand like the vocabulary around all this with manipulation and abuse and these kinds of things, the less confusing a lot of behavior is. That's what I was talking about. When people make that shift, that's when it gets so cool. Because before they're like, I don't know, it just seems really off. And then, within, I don't know, a few weeks or so of being on the forum, they're like, oh, triangulation, projection, gaslighting, love bombing. Like, this is exactly what I'm experiencing. This is exactly why this is a problem. And then they're able to just be done. Like, there is no introspection of, is it this person? Is it me? Da, da, da. Like, they're able to identify what a problem is. Yeah, and that's true. MR says, yeah, and narcissists can believe everyone is out to get them. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see, Jennifer, let me. Okay, she says, so like last night, I kept hearing this zipper noise outside my window at like 2 a.m. And I think I was being paranoid. I asked about what it could be online. I needed to get the validation. And some people had suggested it could be a peeping Tom drone, which I thought sounded a little crazy. But then I was thinking it could be a thief's way of trying to gauge what to steal or see if anyone's home. But in the moment, I felt paranoid. Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily that unusual of a feeling. I think if something registers as off and we get spooked like that, and we don't know for certain what it is or what's going on, it can feel like, am I making a big deal out of this? Or, there's that introspection. That never really goes away. Just FYI, like that's, I think that's there for everybody. But what helps with that is to realize you just err on the side of caution. Have you read the book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker? That's a very triggering book, but it's so interesting. And he talks about one of my favorite scenarios. Well, there's two in there that he talks about that I just really, I think are so interesting. He talks about people that get mail bombs at work. And what do? They're like, oh my gosh, this package looks really strange. It looks like a mail bomb. And other people are saying, boy, hey, that looks like a mail bomb. And everybody's in agreement. Yeah, that sure is strange. And then they open it. And then it's a mail bomb. And then people get hurt or they die. And so they were trying to figure out why this is. And we all tend to move forward when we do move forward in situations like that because we're afraid that we're overreacting. Because to actually say, hey, this actually looks like we should take this seriously, we should call the police or a bomb squad, it seems like, oh, don't be silly. You're overreacting. This is what we were talking about earlier. There's many situations out there where we have to just err on the side of caution. Because if the only way that we can find out for certain is, if the only way we can find out if a package is a mail bomb is to actually open it, then that's not a very good strategy. But that's what so many of us do because we don't want to risk looking foolish or, we try to talk ourselves out of it. We think, oh, come on, who's going to want to send me a mail bomb? These kinds of things. There's been many situations. I used to work at a community mental health, and we had a lot of dangerous people. We had a lot of dangerous situations in that facility. And there were many times where I've been through enough stuff and I was like, you know what? I'm a big fan of err on the side of caution. There's stupid to wait for somebody to follow, to like, you know what I mean? Like wait until it's a problem to then deal with it. Like, let's just head it off at the pass anyways. So, and sometimes, more often than not, those situations ended up not being situations. Nothing happened. But, but then sometimes they did. And so that was what was so frustrating. And that was one of the reasons I finally had to quit that job. Because it was like, y'all don't seem to take this seriously. And I can't have that. Like, I need to work with people that understand that we need to err on the side of caution with stuff like this. So let's see, forward looking. Forward looking says, I used to think people who could move on from toxic relationships quickly were foolish. But I swear the people I know did get over it easier than myself that spend forever trying to understand it. Well, okay, but I think were they, I think what's kind of tripping me up here is we're using the phrase toxic relationships as kind of an umbrella term. And there's, there's different types of trauma that's associated with that. And, and we don't really ever know what's going on with another person and how they really have handled something. For example, I have a friend of mine. She was married to a guy that was incredibly sociopathic, just complete life of deceit, like stole funds from he's looking at jail time for stealing from his company. Other women, just, lying. Just ridiculous, outrageous behavior they were married, I don't know, 15 plus years. And she finally had enough, and, they got a divorce, and she's moved on relatively fast. I was shocked by, how quick, especially since they had gotten married. She was, I think, 18. So this was her only adult relationship she'd ever had. But even though it wasn't like this huge, well, in all fairness to her, she'd gone through a lot for those 15 or 20 years or so that they were married. So I think in a lot of ways, she'd kind of, this level of resiliency had been built up because she'd been going through this stuff. So it was, you find out about an affair, you heal from the affair, you find out about another affair, you heal from that. This was an ongoing thing. So it wasn't like this bomb was dropped in her lap, but to find out after living with somebody, being married to somebody, that everything's been a lie, that's a massive bomb to be dropped in somebody's lap. That's huge. So, in my situation, I was with Jack for like a little over 2 years. And he was Prince Charming the whole time, but had this whole double life full of deceit and like everything about him was a lie. Everything he told me about him was a lie. And that rocked me to the core. And that threw me for a loop for years, because I felt like that's terrifying when somebody can come across as such a, how do you keep yourself safe? Like if a Prince Charming, which we're all taught to, this is the kind of person you want, right? Like this really seemingly wonderful person turns out to be a living nightmare, then what do you look for? And I think that's what rocked me so much. And that's why I just, had a hard time moving on, because it wasn't like anything that I had thought to ever be on the lookout for. Let's see. Forward Looking says, not so much foolish. I just want her to somehow be accountable. Are you talking about the person who is toxic, or who had the toxic behavior, or are you talking about their partner? We'll get to that in a second if you're talking about the person with the toxic behavior. Okay, let me scroll down. And it says, yes, yes, for me it was a bomb. It was like a cop coming to the front door and saying she was killed, when in fact she was in the other end of the house, and I was just discarded for a person I had no clue was in her life. It was so hard to have that feeling, but she was still standing in the room. Yeah, Okay. You're talking about your situation. Yeah, I get it. I think everybody that's been in that situation completely gets it. For me, when I because I found out everything within the span, well, I shouldn't say everything. I found out enough. I found a lot out within a span of like 72 hours. And once I realized just the tip of the iceberg, like once I first realized what was going on, it seriously felt like somebody shoved me in a bathtub full of ice cold water. It was just like it was shock. It was literally shock. It was just all the blood just left my body. I was ice cold, and I just couldn't believe that I had gotten tangled up with somebody like that. So yeah, and it takes, it takes some time to to process all of that hurt and that anger um, from all of that, and to kind of get your bearings again. Yeah, forward looking says, yeah, it was similar. It was less than a week. I was shocked and breathless. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's so many things about this that are difficult, and not, like you said, I think there's just this very human need inside all of us for wanting justice. If a person is victimized, we feel that we want we want justice. We want that right to be, or that wrong to be righted. And in these kinds of situations, for somebody to cause such profound pain and then to just go, skipping on down the bunny trail is really, really, really painful. And it's, yeah, it's hard. I think that's the working kind of working through the anger part of that is something that's a struggle. I mean, in my situation, I had never felt, it wasn't even anger, it was rage. I had never felt rage before in my life. And I had never felt anything, I'd never felt an emotion that extreme before. And it was terrifying for me, terrifying. And I had, I joked about it in one of my videos. This is like my defense mechanism is, sleeping and sarcasm like are my two main defense. I don't have fight or flight. I have sleeping and sarcasm. But I remember at the time thinking like that I wanted to kill him. I was so angry, just the level, just because it wasn't like quote unquote just cheating. It was so much deceit for so long. And it was just awful. And I remember thinking like, okay, if I kill him, then I would go to jail. And then thinking like, well, how long? Like, how long are we talking here? Because I could do 7 to 10 and be totally fine with that. Like that was where my thinking was, which is wild because that's so far away from who I am as a person. And it took all I had to not do that, but yeah, that, and you know what? And you've got 15 plus years under your belt. I mean, that's gonna, that the pain of that and the time and all of it, there's a lot of very, everything that you're feeling is incredibly valid. Forward looking saying, I was exposed to the cheating to the other person's spouse and the smear campaign, and began by saying I was the abusive one to her for 15 years. I was on a tailspin on so many levels. Yeah, when it just adds insult to injury, doesn't it? Like the lies and the smear campaign, it's bad enough that a person's cheating and doing all this other stuff, but it's even worse when they're saying, oh, that you're abusive and that you did all these things that you're like, what? Yeah, it's just a different level of victimization. It's incredibly painful. And it's terrible and it's very difficult. And Mars is saying, it is so scary to be around someone that doesn't care about your feelings or well-being at all, especially when this person acts like they do sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. On a couple different levels, it's scary. It's scary because you don't know what they're capable of. It's scary if you've never seen something like that before, because then it truly feels like you're dealing with evil. Like this person's a demon, because when you've never really anytime, I guess, that I come across a person with such malicious intent and there's that lack of empathy, those traits aren't traits that we normally associate with other people, with humans. And just that lack of remorse and it's just evil. It's evil behavior. So, and it can be difficult. I think a lot of people, understandably so, struggle with not internalizing it, because it's difficult when somebody is so malicious and hate, especially if they're hateful and there's verbal abuse and emotional abuse and all of this, and you're being blamed for all of it. I think normal, decent people just kind of assume, they're trying to work towards a solution. They're trying to be team oriented. They're trying to kind of quote unquote own their part in things, not realizing that they're kind of just unknowingly being abused and being erased by this other person. And it's it's quite the shock. Let me scroll down here. Yes, and that's a good point. So Jack was saying that his last therapist told him that this is where boundary building would help to not absorb the vibes and emotions from people around me as much. Yes. Sometimes I have used the analogy of when we're absorbing anything that's coming our way, it's like having an open window. And so if somebody has a rock and they just throw that rock, it just comes sailing right in, right? And it hits us. But if we're able to have a little bit of a wall, that you shut the window and make that window plexiglass. So you're shutting that window, and then you decide when to open that window and when not to. And so if somebody's throwing rocks at you, to realize, hey, there's something wrong with that person because they're throwing rocks. So they're the one with the issue, but I'm still going to be able to protect myself from them. So I'm going to close my plexiglass window, and I'm going to start getting some distance from them, because that's just not okay. So I think realizing that there's other ways that we can perceive these situations can be really helpful, because at the time, if a person, you probably also heard me talk about, it's the difference between keeping your hurt feelings and your self-worth in two different buckets. So if somebody's hurling insults at you, or they have all this hurtful behavior, they've cheated on you with dozens of people and just all kinds of stuff, it's okay, it's understandable to have hurt feelings by that, but we don't have to internalize that and make it about us. We can say, hey, you know what? This person's got some major issues. All of their behavior is a reflection of them. I'm not going to own that. That's on them, not on me. And so that can really help to just kind of separate the two like that. And Karen is saying, I like the idea of keeping the window shut. I try to observe, not absorb energy. I tell myself to not to stare. I think you meant stare at others, focusing on too much on them. And that's a good idea too. Jack was saying visualization can help. If you're picking up all of the emotional vibes of a crowd or a room, anything you can do to shield yourself. So there's a couple different things that you can do with that. Sometimes people find that it's helpful to imagine like a bubble around you. Like if you remember the movie The Wizard of Oz, Glenda the Good Witch had that bubble she traveled in. So like your little bubble car, she had that bubble that she was in. And so putting a protective bubble around you. So it does help to visualize this stuff. So then when you're interacting with people, there's just kind of this shield of white light or some sort of, you can get as creative with this as you want to get, some sort of filter that everything is passing through. You can also do things like, one of my favorite ones is visualizing like a waterfall. I used to do this, visualizing this over every door. So, because when I was in nursing school and we were doing clinical rotations, I had a really difficult time being in hospitals. It was too many people and it was too many sick people. And I would end up getting sick. It was just, I'm the kind of, if I watch a freaking commercial with a person with a head cold, I will feel like I have a head cold for like 20 minutes after that commercial. It's ridiculous. And so actually, so being around all of that, by the end of the day, I felt awful. I had every single ailment like under the sun. And I didn't realize for the longest time what was going on. And then it was other nurses who had told me, yeah, you've got to be able to like basically reset yourself after this, or you're taking it all on. You've got somebody with a broken arm, then your arm starts hurting. You've got somebody with, that pneumonia, then your chest starts hurting, these kinds of things. And so visualizing a waterfall, like a cleansing waterfall that to walk under after you would either go into or come out of every single room, that it would just wash everything, or just kind of purify yourself, helped tremendously. So doing little things like that can help with energy resets and kind of help with boundaries and these kinds of things. But yeah, it's a challenge. Yes, Karen says, oh my God, I absorb sickness too. I have to say, no, I will not get sick. Yes, Rob says, I actually fainted once at a nutrition wellness convention when doctors started listing off all these symptoms. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. And so, yeah, just kind of realizing that it's so wild when like you just don't realize that that's an issue because you just have been that way. You just have been that way your whole life. So, yeah. Jack is saying, I guess I understand the notion now, what people are saying, that 12-step groups can be very vulnerable to narcissistic abuse. Well, I think here's the thing is support groups in general can definitely, it can be a great hunting ground for a lot of problematic people. In addition to that, there's a strong overlap between addiction and a lot of mainly antisocial personality. So like really high. I forget the statistics. It's something like 80% or so of, I think, substance abusers would also register or be considered antisocial personality disorder. So, and I don't know if that means like when they're sober, they would, I don't know. I don't know the specifics of it, but I think what the point of that is, a lot of dysfunctional behavior tends to kind of beget more dysfunctional behavior. So if a person, because here's my take on addiction, isn't the problem. Addiction is a symptom. And so this is why people can get sober and still be like a dry drunk, or they quit, I don't know, they quit doing heroin or something, but then they pick something else up, because it's not just the thing. And so people will say, oh, I just have an addictive personality. It's like, yeah, but there's also oftentimes there's these deeper issues that they're not maybe consciously aware of. And that's the thing. Whenever we're doing, that's kind of the silver lining, I guess, of extreme behavior like this is, it's, if we can see it as a symptom of something, that there's a reason, when a person is trying to escape through drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping, you name it, there's the deeper reason is why are they trying to escape? What are they trying to run from? And then really working on that deeper piece of the puzzle gives way to a lot of clarity. Because if you're working at it from the top down, if you're just working on the food addiction, or, and I say just like in quotes, because these are all obviously very major real things, and I don't mean to minimize that, or the alcoholism or the drug addiction or what have you, that's why these things tend to just keep shifting. So then it goes from, they quit drinking, but now they're smoking twice as much, or now they've gained 100 pounds, or now, on and on and on. So it's, anyways, so I think at the end of the day, it's important for people to just always to understand what it means to have healthy boundaries in general, and to bring those healthy boundaries all the time, because it really just needs to be an extension of who you are in every single situation. That's the danger, I think, with a lot of support groups, is because it's all about letting down your guard, right? It's all about being open and sharing. And when people are being open about really deeply personal things about their life, it creates this bonding that wouldn't be there otherwise. And so that, can kind of create this artificial closeness. And especially if when people find their way, generally, when they find their way into some sort of 12-step group, they're oftentimes at a really low point in their life, and they're scared and they're lonely and, just ripe for vulnerability. Yeah, I agree. Jack was saying, I think addiction can be an unhealthy coping response to years of trauma. Yep. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And Jack was saying, I think codependence is the one area where predators can really prey on support groups. They will ferret out codependence and other enabler types. That's a really great point. Forward looking, it asks, what about addiction and trauma? I wonder if that's a similar statistic. My guess is it probably is. I would be curious to know the stats for like childhood abuse of either physical or sexual, and addictions. I bet it's the same. Because that's what people, whenever we start doing things that are that out of balance, when we're doing anything to excess like that, when we're in a place of crisis, we get to a place of crisis when our stress exceeds our available coping mechanisms. So that's kind of what crisis is, when the stress in our life exceeds our coping mechanisms. And so when when we kind of run out of ideas, we're like, I don't know. Like, and of course, this isn't conscious, right? I mean, nobody decides, oh, I'm going to go be an alcoholic. Like, that doesn't happen that way. But this, again, this stuff's not taught. So this isn't a conscious thing for most people, because most people don't learn even the phrase coping mechanisms until they start needing them, right? Until they start learning about, oh, hey, I need to develop some of these. And, that's kind of like a little bit after the fact. It would be so much more helpful if we were to have these conversations starting in elementary school with people, so they could identify this stuff. Because this stuff, when we go into crisis and we start to panic and we can't process all of this stress, our brain decides for us. So we have these defaults, the fight, flight, or freeze, or the basic, the main ones. And so we don't have, our brain just defaults. I mean, if you've ever watched shows like My 600-Pound Life, a lot of those people are like, you know what, something profoundly traumatic happened to them. And it's heartbreaking, because they're like, you know what, I don't know, I just ended up here. Like, had a really difficult time, and I ate and I ate and I ate, and now I'm here. Like, then I was 600 pounds. So, and that's how that happens. The same thing with alcoholism or drug addiction or anything else. It just happens little by little, and then it just starts snowballing, and then there's all the shame and embarrassment surrounding it. And people have a hard time asking, for help, and yeah, and so on. So it's just a challenge. I really hope. Yes, Karen, that's a great question. She asked, is codependency and enabling a coping skill? Yes, I fully believe that they are. I really think you could make the case. I'll have to chew on this for a little bit, but I really think you could make the case that any extreme behavior is a coping mechanism. There's something there. So we're kind of overcompensating for something. So with codependency, and I guess when we're talking about codependency, that core, supposedly the core kind of more of is this fear of abandonment is the core issue there. And then how that results is kind of merging with another person to feel complete, and to people pleasing and ingratiating behavior, and a lot of this stuff. Enabling often goes hand in hand with that. I don't know. A lot of this stuff, because with enabling, if you're on the receiving end, if you're living with an addict of any kind, or an abusive, let's just say an addict of any kind, they can be so manipulative, and they can be so awful to live with, and so volatile and all of that. A lot of the enablers oftentimes give in just out of fear, and because they're stuck, they can't leave, or they're afraid to leave, or they're backed into a corner. So I think a lot of this stuff would be resolved if it was just taught beforehand, instead of like waiting till a person's in the thick of the situation to try to explain to them what's going on. Yeah. And Frankendahl, that's probably a better way to say it. She says, codependency is a survival skill. Yep. And Kevin was saying, I lived with an alcoholic fresh out of jail for a DUI for a while. It was a nightmare. I didn't want to go home. Yeah, Michael was saying, yep, or they just don't know how to ask for help. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Frankendahl said, in my area, they're teaching children meditation as a coping skill. I have heard this in some schools where they were teaching yoga, I think during recess. So like mind body awareness and I meditate. I think it's fantastic. Just emotional management, being still, being present, being in your body. I'm all for it. It's great. I'm excited. I'm excited for this next generation to kind of see where they're going to go with things. I hope I live to be like 150 or even older so I can see all this stuff unfold. I just think it's so cool. Let's see. Okay. So I guess with that, the alarm went off. I need to abide by that. So let's take some time. We'll do our guided meditation and then we'll call it a night. And then I will see you guys. Oh, actually, Angie and I were doing a live stream tomorrow because I wasn't able to do one yesterday. So I forget whose channel we're on. I think we're on her channel tomorrow. So tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Michael says 150 sounds too wrinkly. Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. My bigger issue is that I will keep shrinking, and I'm only about 5 feet tall as it is. So by the time I'm 150, I'll be like 2 feet tall. It is what it is, I guess. Okay, so let's take some time, find a comfortable spot, whether it's in a chair or lying down. Just be present in your body and present in this moment. Let's take a series of 7 breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. With each breath in, allowing that breath to travel down deep down into the bases of your lungs, allowing your whole chest to rise and fall. We start to notice feelings of relaxation after about the 3rd exhale. With each inhale, we're activating our sympathetic nervous system. And each exhale then in turn activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which allows for us the whole kind of rest and digest functions of our body. And so you might have maybe been to a yoga class or seen maybe yogis on TV, and they have what's known as pressurized breathing, where it sounds like they're fogging up a mirror. They exhale like that. And it's to slow down the breath to allow for a greater sense of relaxation. That's why. So there's great power in exhaling. And bringing your awareness, turning it inward. feeling your body, your feet perhaps on the ground, or your body as it's laying in a bed. Feeling the resistance of the floor, or the support, we'll say the support of the floor underneath you, the support of the mattress underneath you or the chair underneath you. Just being present in this moment, knowing that you are supported both physically and emotionally. Knowing that your body is your temple and that it's a good and safe place to be. Taking some time to acknowledge all that is good and right about you. And there is lots that is good and right about you. You guys ask fantastic questions. You support each other. Support 100 and plus strangers from all over the world. I think that's so cool. You're dedicated to personal growth, dedicated to your healing. Learning so many amazing, empowering skills. Learning how to value yourself because you are worth valuing. Learning to get back in tune with your authentic self and what makes you uniquely you. Acknowledging the variety of gifts that you have. And acknowledging the variety of challenges that you have. It's all part of this human experience. And these challenges, even though they can be incredibly painful and unpleasant, there's so much growth that can happen that we can consciously choose to squeeze out of these experiences so that we can make it work for your highest and greatest good. Let's visualize a waterfall. Let's visualize one over your doorway so we can practice that skill because it's handy and it's kind of fun. So visualizing a waterfall, perhaps it's shiny, sparkly, silver white light. And maybe there's a sound, maybe it's loud, or maybe there's no sound at all and it's just kind of glistening. Let's take a few moments and just acknowledge where there might be any heaviness that you've taken on, either today or even over the years, that perhaps you're feeling the weight of and that you're ready to let go. That you're ready for it to just wash away. You've gotten the messages from it and it's time. So let's visualize walking towards that doorway, that magical, wonderful, healing waterfall that's right in that doorway, and walking slowly through it. as it just easily and effortlessly just washes away all of that heaviness. It's almost like mud, all of that heavy, dark sludge stuff, that residue just washes it away. Feeling yourself kind of coming out on the other side, just so clean and fresh and light. So much lighter. You can feel yourself standing, or if you're sitting or laying down, just feeling your back get straighter and just feeling that lightness as the weight just lifts from your shoulders. Realizing that you have the power to make this waterfall appear whenever you would like and whenever you need to. It's something that you can do when you're at home or at work or when you're on vacation, and whenever you want, it's there for you. Anytime you're feeling like you need a little system reset, or you're feeling kind of irritated, or maybe even just a little run down and you don't know why, just allowing that waterfall to just recharge you and connect you to everything that is good and right in the world. And there truly is. There's so much amazingness out there. Life is not fair, but it truly is still good. So when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Come on back. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will see you guys tomorrow over on Angie's channel. And if not, then I will see you guys, next Wednesday? Wednesday here, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So have a fantastic week. And as always, lots of love to you guys. And you are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and just lots of love. All my love to you. Good night.